Up until now, every story I've told has been mine. My family, my records, my people, whether I want to claim them or not, which honestly was enough to keep me busy the rest of my life. There is no shortage of material in my family tree. Not a single branch is behaving. But this one isn't mine. This story belongs to a dear friend of mine. And like most family stories, it didn't come to me as a question. It came as an answer. She left. That's it. That's the version that's been told and retold and accepted. No follow up or context, and no one asking what came before it. Just a woman who walked away from her children and never came back. And I don't know if that's the way my brain works or if genealogy has just ruined me as a person. But the second I hear a story that clean, I don't believe it. Because people are not clean. Records are not clean. And stories that survive this long almost never are. So I did what I always do. I went looking. I started pulling records, census, marriage, anything that would give me a starting point that wasn't just a conclusion. And very quickly, it stopped being simple. Because the first thing I found wasn't about her leaving. It wasn't about children. It wasn't about disappearance. It was a marriage. December of 1940. Carson City, Nevada. Billye Mae Guckian, 18 years old. I didn't have proof right away, just a timeline that didn't make sense, and a birth record that didn't line up with that. I reached out to the archives in Carson City when I began researching this story, and there was some pearl clutching over the suggestion that she might not have been 18. The record said 18, end of discussion. So for a while, that's all there was. A record that didn't match the reality I was seeing. And then on a weekend in March, a few months after, I found it. A small newspaper article. An annulment filed by her parents. And just like that, the timeline corrected itself. And that's when everything shifts. Because now we're not looking at a woman who made a series of bad decisions. We're looking at a child whose life had already gone sideways before anyone ever expected her to hold it together. And once you see that, you can't go back. We like to think stories begin with the moment everything goes wrong. That there's a clear line. Before this, everything was fine. After this, everything changed. But that's not how it works. Stories start earlier, in the quiet parts. The parts that look normal if you're not paying attention. Because that's usually where the story really starts. And I think that's one of the things I've learned from living with CPTSD. I'm not a doctor and I'm not here to diagnose anybody. But I do know what it feels like when your body understands a pattern before your mind can explain it. It's not always one big event. Sometimes it's years of small moments, years of reading the room, years of bracing, and years of learning what keeps you safest, even if it costs you something. So when I look at a story like this, I'm not only looking for the moment everything broke, I'm looking for the quiet lead up, the pressure, the warning signs, the things everyone survived so long that they became the norm in repeating patterns. Billye was born in 1926 in Oklahoma City to William Joseph Guckian and Mae Brown. Her brother John William was born 3 years later in 1929. So on paper, it looks like a stable start. 2 parents, a younger brother, extended family, a working household. Her father and grandfather were both plumbers. Which doesn't sound like much, but it meant something. It meant consistency, income, and it meant you could reasonably expect tomorrow to look like today. And for a while it did. But sometime in the early 1930s, that stability breaks. Her father, Joe, leaves. He marries another woman named Marie. And records don't show the emotional impact of something like that. They don't show who explained it. They don't show what Billye understood. They don't show what she was told. They just show that one day the household changed, and then that second marriage ends too. April 1936, divorced from Marie. Fast forward to July 1936, remarried to May. 3 months. And again, the records don't tell you tone. They don't tell you if this was relief or tension or something everyone just learned to live with. They just tell you what happened. But if you sit with it, that's enough. Because from Billye's perspective, before she's even 10 years old, her father leaves, builds a new life with someone else, ends it, and comes back. And life just continues. No reset, no explanation, no moment where anyone says this isn't how things are supposed to go, just forward. And not long after that, they leave Oklahoma. Sometime between 1936 and 1940, the family is in Martinez, California. Martinez in the late 1930s is a different kind of place. Close to the water, close to industry. Everything's starting to shift. Not Oklahoma, not what she grew up with, just something new and unfamiliar enough to matter. On paper, that move makes sense. Work, opportunity, a fresh start. Her father is still working as a plumber, which would have been in demand as things were ramping up before the war. But moves like that are rarely just about work. They're about distance. A new place where no one knows what happened. No one asks questions. No one remembers the version of your life that didn't work. A clean slate. At least that's the idea. Because what doesn't change is the pattern. Billye doesn't grow up watching a stable relationship with one bad moment. She grows up watching a break, a replacement, and a return. Not a clean ending, not a clean beginning, just a cycle. And by the time she's a teenager, that cycle is familiar. And 4 years later, Billye is 14 years old and getting married. After the annulment, there's a gap. Not a huge one. But it's the kind of gap where everything important happens and almost none of it gets recorded. And when Billye shows up again, she's not 14 anymore. She's 17. In July of 1943, there's a newspaper announcement. Billye Mae married to David Smith, Rossville, Georgia. And this is where things get less clean because I've looked everywhere and I cannot find a formal marriage record. No certificate, no application, nothing that neatly confirms how this happened. What there is the announcement and the timeline. Billye is 17. David is 16. So we sit with that. Because whether it was formal or not, they are in every way that matters married. And from here, everything accelerates. April 1944, a daughter, Priscilla. July 1945, a son, David. 15 months, 2 children, and then everything shifts again. By 1947, David Smith has remarried. And by 1950, the records stop hinting and start showing. David is living with his new wife. Her name's also Billye. They have twin daughters, about a year old. And Billye's children, Priscilla and David, are not there. They're living with his parents. Different house, different arrangement, same family. Billye is not in that household. She shows up in Oklahoma. Billye Smith. And again, there's no record that explains it. No document that says why the marriage ended. How the children ended up where they did. What anyone decided. Just the outcome. 2 children were raised in one home, and their mother is somewhere else. And this is where the story usually stops. This is the version that survives. The version that becomes she left. But by the time we get here, that's not the beginning of the story. That's the result. By 1950, the version of the story most people remember is already in place. The children are with their grandparents, the marriage is over, and Billye is somewhere else. That's usually where the narrative stops, but it didn't stop for her. In January of 1950, there's another record, a birth, a daughter, Valley. The father is listed as John B. Llewellyn. So whatever happened between the end of her marriage to David and this moment, she didn't disappear. She didn't vanish. She did keep going. What follows is not a clean start. In January of 1951, Billye files for divorce from John B. Llewellyn. In that filing, she requests a restraining order. By December of that same year, there's a marriage record. Billye and John B. Llewellyn in Guymon, Oklahoma. And then again, that same month, another divorce filing. The last record of that cycle appears in March of 1955. So this isn't one relationship beginning and ending. It's something that starts, breaks, reconnects, and breaks again. And just like before, the records don't explain it. They don't tell you what brought them together or what kept pulling them back. They just show you where things land over and over again. If you step back, it starts to look less like a series of isolated decisions and more like a pattern that never really changed. Not something new, something familiar. There's also context around him that complicates things further. John had been married before, starting in 1945 with 3 children of his own. That marriage overlaps this timeline more than neatly precedes it. And I'm not even going to get into the rest of it here, other than to say it eventually involves an alias, a self-proclaimed priest, and a lot of marijuana. So again, nothing about this is clean, and life keeps moving. In the 1950s, Billye loses both of her parents, first her father, then her mother. Whatever support system existed before is gone. After that, the records get quieter. Not gone, just thinner. Addresses change. Names shift. Nothing seems to settle in one place for long. And this is the part that doesn't fit the version of the story that survived. Because she didn't disappear. She lived. She married again. She moved. She kept building something even if it didn't last. Eventually, she ends up in Texas, Friendswood. And in 2008, there's one final record. Billye Mae Llewellyn. That's the name she dies under. And that's where this paper trail ends. By the time I finished putting this together, I understood why the story stayed the way it did. She left is easy to remember. It's clean, it's short, it doesn't require context. And to be fair, for the people who lived it, that part is real. A mother was not there. The outcome didn't change just because the timeline got more complicated. But the records tell a longer story. Not a neat one, not a comfortable one, just a fuller one. A girl who married at 14. A marriage that had to be undone by her parents. A second marriage before she was even fully grown. 2 children in quick succession. A household that didn't hold. Children raised somewhere else. And then, not a disappearance, a continuation. Another relationship, another child. Years of starting and stopping, building and losing, moving and trying again. Not stable, not simple, but not nothing. And I think that's the part that gets lost. Because when a story gets reduced to one sentence, everything else disappears with it. The context, the age, the patterns, the things that don't excuse what happened but explain how it got there. And maybe that doesn't change the ending, but it changes how you understand it. Billye Mae Guckian didn't just leave. She lived a life that didn't fit into a clean version of events. And for a long time, that life got compressed into something easier to say. Now at least it's whole again. And I'll say this just once. This one took a lot of work. Across states, across names, across records that didn't line up until they did. Pieces that only made sense after going back 3 or 4 steps and looking again. This wasn't a quick search. It was digging and circling back and sitting with things that didn't fit until they did. And I'm proud of that because this story deserved to be done right. And I think it was. I'll say this too. This branch of the tree has been very generous in ways I wasn't expecting. The kind of story that keeps unfolding the more you look, where every answer leads to 3 more questions, and none of them are simple. This wasn't a straight line. It was turns and gaps and things that didn't make sense until they did, and somehow all of it still fits together. If you've made it this far with me, thank you. This one was a lot for me and probably for you too. And if there's one thing I keep learning doing this, it's that the stories we inherit are rarely the whole story. They're the version that survived. Sometimes that version is true. Sometimes it's just incomplete. And every once in a while, if you're willing to sit with it long enough, you get to see the rest. I'll be back soon with more, and apparently at some point, the weed priest we found out about. So stay tuned for that. Until then, take care of yourselves, and maybe ask one more question than you think you should. You never know what's sitting just underneath the answer.